Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II podcast, and we're back live after my trip across the Atlantic Ocean and back, but not to be outdone, or to be outdone. Jeff is going to be on his way to the other side of the freaking globe, so we'll get to that here shortly. Dennis, what's going on, fella?
Well, actually, there's a lot going on, but just more of the same old, same old. I'm looking forward to tonight. A lot of good stuff to chat about. It's going to be pretty good.
You know, if I didn't have my beard, I would demand that you grew your beard back because you have a stronger chin than I do. I used to be known as the man with the strong chin before I grew my beard out, but I think if you and I were both to do a clean shave contest, I think it would be hard struggle because you got a pretty strong chin there, fella, ever since you got rid of that beard. How did your wife feel after you shaved your beard for the first time in forever?
Well, I'm not married, so.
Oh, my bad. I thought
no,
you
it's
were.
okay. Thanks for bringing it up. It's just like really hard to talk about.
So yeah, I hopped on a cruise ship and I went down to the Bahamas, and I have never seen water so dark blue in my life. It's insane. Like once you get, I mean, even just going across the state to Miami, their water is a hell of a lot cleaner than ours is here in Southwest Florida. Because fun fact, we had this big ass lake in the middle of Florida that's surrounded by sugarcane plantations, and all of their fertilizer goes into Lake Okeechobee, and then when they release it, all comes down here and turns our water. All these fun colors of brown and green. The natural flow of Lake Okeechobee was to Miami, but they back in like the 50s they did construction and diverted it over here so not to impact their tourism, so we get their naturally dirty water. But anyhow, drove to Miami, enjoyed the teal water, but when you got out in the ocean, I have never seen that dark blue of water before. It was insane. Wow. How dark blue it was. And then obviously when we got to Bahamas, you saw the teal green. But to the subject matter of this podcast, I was thinking how beautiful this was, and now the mindset of being in the Pacific and during the war. You know, you guys are traveling through that beautiful blue water, and then when it comes to time to land on Peleliu or Guadalcanal or whatever that we've been bombing the hell out of for 5, 6, 7 days, how the environmental impact and how the contrast of that burnt, bombarded landscape to that super clean teal water versus a green like river water, it had to make the devastation look that much more devastating opposed to if it had horrible, normal green water that we're all used to seeing. It's like, because I don't know, I guess we take it for granted until you actually go out that far out into the ocean and see, oh, this is what our water's supposed to look like. It's I knew it was blue, but the color blue in which the Atlantic Ocean is undescribable unless you've seen it with your own eyes. It's hard to decipher and explain how blue that water actually is. And
then the depths by the different color blue, right?
Yeah, because it goes from like dark blue to like turquoise real quick.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's pretty amazing.
But Jeff, you guys are getting ready to go on vacation, or do we want to talk more about the fact that I think Dennis got bit by the reenacting bug? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd like to talk about Dennis first. I mean,
Sure.
You heard it, ladies. For those who are listening, Dennis is single. He has a strong
chin.
He's a great rider. So you ladies out there, let Dennis know.
How you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing?
So, all ladies, send your emails to mailcall@WTSPWWII.com, and maybe we'll have a contest of win a date with Dennis if you live in the greater Texas area. And maybe he'll take you out for a fine steak dinner and talk your ear off about World War II history and other things.
That was absolutely amazing, actually.
Well, let's get into it. I mean,
that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
First of all, Don, I intellectually I knew what I was getting into, right? Because you hear, oh, there's going to be planes there, there's going to be aircraft there, there's going to be other reenactors, there's going to be this and that, and we're staying at a hangar, and so I knew what all of these different elements look like. I just didn't know what they all look like together at one place. And we had an interesting ride up there, and we thought that maybe our trip was going to be literally derailed there at one point, but worked out. We got there, like, I walk into this hangar, the side door, all the hangar doors are closed. I just walk in a side door and all the lights are on the inside, and they're just these bright, beautiful, bright lights. And there's this hallway, and I'm walking in the hallway, and I turn. I just wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared. There's just this pristine P-51 gunfighter right there, gunslinger. And there's B-17 and a B-24. And by the way, tucked behind the B-17 somehow is a B-29. It's just, I just stood there just stunned. And then I just immediately remembered that, we're staying here tonight. And it was just, I don't know. It was kind of like a Twilight episode where me and Jeff both lost like 20 years and we were like teens and we were running around and it was just friggin', it was amazing.
Which, by the way, for those of you who are Patreon members and you've seen Jeff's exclusive video content, that B-29 looked like someone spent 3 weeks with a chamois and a half a gallon or 5-gallon drum of Windex. That thing was super clean and spotless, at least on the video. I mean, it literally looked like somebody bought stock in Turtle Wax or Simply Green or something. That thing was as shiny as a coin in a frog's eye or whatever. Sort of. It was insane. Which, by the way, shout out to Jeff. Good job on that video. That turned out well. Your presentation was well. And if you guys want to see what we're talking about, head over to What's the Scuttlebutt or WTSPWWII.com. Click on the Patreon link, sign up, subscribe, where you can go see the preview video over on our YouTube channel. But so now what was it like getting into that uniform?
Yeah, well, first of all, the only uniform that I would fit into was German.
That checks out.
What was available? Yeah, it does check out with the strong chin and everything.
Yep.
And, it was fine. I was, and it turned out to be, I was nervous, but because, you don't know, nowadays people are so fragile. Mm-hmm. But, I was kind of nervous, but, I'm walking around and it was a huge hit. Like everybody wanted pictures with me and but and then it gave me an opportunity, and Jeff and I to stand together and, both perspectives and kind of just, it was pretty awesome. And what really got me was the amazing, just these beautiful display tables that Jeff has, and all of the collecting that he's been doing. And it's not everything is unique. Everything is important. Everything is just perfect for the table. And you can tell like so much care and time and selection and specificity went into every single thing that's on that table. And what was great about the place that they set us up was that if you're there, you turned because you're interested. And Jeff is like, perfect person. He was just there, and it was just great.
After watching a full day of him repeatedly giving the same presentation with some modifications, obviously, as we all do you kind of understand what I mean when I say it's almost like it's kind of like having a table at a sales convention or a trade show. Sure. You're literally you're selling your wares, but in this case, we're selling history. We're not talking about a table full of shower heads. We're talking about a table full of history. But it's the same presentation. You got to have that same sales pitch. You got to have that same interaction. And for any of you young parents out there, or even old parents, I'm going to say parents of young kids or even teenage kids, another added benefit to if your child wants to get into living history or has even a remote curiosity of getting involved in that, if that is something that's foreseeable for your family, that goes a long way, especially with today's kids, on building social interaction skills. Because as we all know, they're staring at cell phones nowadays, even at lunchroom at the table. They're texting their friend who's sitting across from them. But when you take them and put them in an environment where cell phones aren't allowed while the public's around, first few of them, they'll be shy, but they'll slowly come out. The more they learn about what they're going to demonstrate, and the more they've given their little speeches after 6 months or a year of doing it, it'll impact their daily life. Just the ability to talk to strangers is a tremendous aspect and education value of being in this hobby.
You could see it in their step too. There was a lot of kids there, right, Jeff? There was a lot of kids there that were dressed up, and they were dressed up well.
Yeah, yeah, that was really fun to see and talk to and interact with them. I recognized one kiddo that I took a picture with the year prior with the little Lathe Air Force jacket and the captain's bars and everything. I mean, it was great. But yeah, I mean, like you said, we had a nice presentation, but the environment, and we need to back up a little bit, Don. So we were literally at the headquarters for the Commemorative Air Force, right? Which is now up in Dallas. So it's a $57 million building, and which is like what Dennis described. That was the main hangar we went into, but the foyer, the entrance foyer, which has a P-51 hanging, a red tail hanging from the rafters there, with some really nice freestanding displays. Some are interactive. You hit a button, the Tuskegee Airmen kind of come to life. Uniforms, toys of the period, and sheet music, and pictures of Bob Hope and Clark Gable, and for that to be our setting, for that to be reserved for us, of all of the reenactors that were out there, like sucking it up in a World War II tent in a torrential downpour that night, and we're inside in the AC watching the lightning from the foyer of the CF headquarters. It was really special, and I don't know if I've ever been nervous going to a program like that, but I will say that I was at least cognizant of the fact that our display needed to be worthy of the CAF headquarters foyer. For to be in there for 2 days, we definitely had to be more than just, hey, come check us out. you know.
So what I'm hearing is they had a tremendous Windex budget. No, to that point, and I'm sure Jeff may have some of these for different impressions, maybe not for this particular event, but Dennis, one thing that you'll see that were some of the long-term groups, the guys have been around and they specialize on maybe one or two particular campaigns, especially the industrious guys who have a nice bandsaw at home, is they'll kind of recreate World War II style mission maps, but out of wood so that they hold up, and they'll paint the layers and all that. So sometimes you'll go to an event, you'll see, a real nice wood map set up of, whatever particular campaign they're talking about. So, I'm
looking forward to meeting those guys too.
But to Jeff's point, though, when you're kind of headlining, for lack of better terminology, this event, and you're on the main stage, you don't want to have local band set list. You got to have your stuff squared away, your presentation squared away. You're going to have somebody like Jeff, who's obviously with his years at the museums and plus teaching, having somebody who does not have a remote fear or hesitation of public speaking definitely is required for that sort of thing.
Yeah. We met several people, like Dennis said too, that younger kids, and I mean, dude, remember the guy who was there? He's a former Army captain. I'm just going to lovingly refer to him as Tulsa. And if he's listening, he'll know exactly that I'm talking about him. But Tulsa, man, if you're listening, I can't wait for you to get into the hobby, because he hung around our table, I don't know, on and off maybe 6 hours.
Yeah.
Came that morning with his mom, found out that John Luckadoo was going to be there, and then what time? He's like, "Oh man, we're gonna hang around for that." So he hung around, got to see John Luckadoo, and then came back again. I think it was like something about 5 or 5:30 that he had finally said his goodbye, and I think I met him about 11 o'clock that morning, and just super pumped and super interested to kind of get back in the hobby, get in a uniform, and do what we do and keep it alive. And that, to me, when you've got a kid that's interested, or you've just got somebody who is squared away, like Tulsa is, man, it just, I get it. It's exhausting. You're talking to a lot of people. Sometimes you're repeating things. I mean, I wouldn't quite call it a sales pitch. I kind of let people browse, let them, answer the first question, or if they seemed to be like they were wanting me to say something, I would just open with, hey, almost everything you see here is original. Let me know if you have any questions. Some of the interesting pieces are this, this, and this. It depends. Or if you've got a girl that's like, wow, this is really cool. Okay, I'm like, hey, have you ever felt real silk?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever felt 100% silk before?
Yeah.
No. Here's a silk map. Or Yeah, there was some kids, the siblings, brothers and sisters, like a group of kids. Well, they're not going to care about that so much, but that spiel was about, hey, look at all this is all the stuff that went to war. Let me show you this steel penny. And why is it a steel penny? Well, let me show you this copper jacketed 50 caliber round or some commo equipment. And so we just talked about war rationing, and, things like that. So it kind of depended on the audience, which makes it great because, like I said, you're not trying to sell shower heads, right? You're
Yeah.
not saying the same thing over and over. You can read your audience and kind of build from that. But
It just
um,
occurred to me because I haven't really thought about it since the whole thing happened. But the perfect example of trying to, sometimes when we're talking about history or certain things to make people understand or make it more personable, sometimes you try to compare it to something that they may have experienced. And the perfect thing with that food rationing, remember during the pandemic when things first got crazy and went to the store and there was no toilet paper or there was no bottled water or there was no mask, there was no, Kleenexes. Well, they kind of experienced the same thing during World War II. And so what the government did to try to intervene on panic buying or hoarding is they issued these ration stamps. And in order to buy these things, you had to have these stamps. And then that kind of makes sense. And so I never thought about that'd be a good way to bring modern day into some of obviously the teenagers who remember those early years of the pandemic. But that's kind of another easy way to use as an example. That's a perfect example why we had these stamps, is so that when you went to the store, everything wasn't barren because people were buying more than they needed.
all right. And that makes it nice because, like I said, I've got a good enough eclectic collection to kind of get interest from just about anybody. And back to
Yeah.
what Dennis said, yeah, folks came through the foyer and then some of them wanted to go immediately out to the hangar, or some of them saw us. And, it wasn't just my display. I mean, I was connected with a couple other reenactors, friends of ours. They were all in our group and I want to say it was about 40 linear feet, about five or six, 6 to 8 foot tables. So it was a quite a display. So some people went, "Oh, I need to look over there," or they hit it on the way out.
Yeah.
So what made it really nice was you weren't bombarded, you know, you weren't fighting a lot of background noise. And for some of the people, I can think of one gentleman specifically whose father was a top turret gunner on a B-17. For him, it was a beautiful prelude because he came in, he saw, my collection. I try to make it to where there's some personal effects, things that you would find in a Foot Locker, things that you would be wearing, in combat. Some of the combat gear, bombardier stuff, navigational equipment, tools of the trade. So a little bit of everything, and then just stuff you may pick up in London, just to tie it all together. For him to see that first and then to walk over to Sentimental Journey, look up that ladder through the front hatch, directly up into that very cramped top turret position. He came back to say goodbye and to shake my hand, and the guy had tears in his eyes. It hit him. He got the full experience of this is what my dad was reading, or this is what was in his pocket. This is what he was eating. This is what he was wearing in the air. This is what helped keep him alive. Then he goes and sees essentially his dad's workspace, and then comes back in to tie it in. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, we just met a lot of great people, a lot of great stories that came out of it. And definitely something that I know Dennis really wants to talk about. I'm hoping he'll want to talk about some of his short stories, and ideas that he's got coming down the pipe, and some of the gifts that we received. Yeah, and I've got some interesting history for listeners later on in the show. Some about a campaign we don't talk about a whole lot, so I'm excited about that too.
Well, before we get into that, just a heads up, after we do our session here with me, Dennis, and Jeff, at the end of the show, we're going to break away to a pre-recorded one-on-one interview I did with one of our listeners from Belgium named Kristof. And Kristof just finalized his fundraising campaign to pay for 2 plaques that are going to be located in Germany, the location where the crew of the B-17 called Betsy Ross, who was headed up by Lieutenant Perry Powell, was shot down, and the crew members served time over in that POW camp. Not only he did a fundraiser to pay for 2 plaques there, but the awesome news is he got the government of Belgium to pay for a statue of two of the pilots that's going to be put up in Belgium at the area where the plane went down. So that interview's coming up at the end. He's going to come on after the show. He's going to come on for a follow-up show after the opening of the statue occurs. But I bring it up because, Jeff, you would have been so jealous. He's in Belgium. His area of expertise, because the town he lives in, is the 8th Air Force. And I was asking him, back in the day, was it easier to find a lot of that stuff overseas? Because in my experience, that stuff got sent over there, was used over there, opposed to it being here. He had behind him, during this interview, was a full mannequin like my Steve, completely dressed head to toe with mask, with full all original Air Corps wool, leather wool, the whole nine. Every piece of equipment, all of it original, no reproduction. Like, I was like, oh, Jeff would love to see that. So he's going to come on for a follow-up episode. So stick around at the end of the show. We're going to play that interview. It's cool to hear all the things that he had to do to get this statue approved and put in place, and let alone funded by the Belgian government, which was awesome. And then the additional steps and some of the restrictions that Germany put on the plaques that he wanted to put up. So stick around for that. But
awesome.
Before we get into Jeff's talk about the Greece campaign, Dennis, Jeff alluded that you might have some more things to talk about.
Yeah, there's it's interesting the conversations you get into in a German uniform and walking around. And
Speaking of walking around, I jotted this down. I didn't want to interrupt you earlier. Did you have on the authentic boots?
Yes.
Now, after spending an entire day in those loud-ass boots walking around on stellar concrete, isn't it amazing that was considered quality military footwear for the Germans? I mean, you guys there's no hiding in those things, right? You might have just had a circus following you down the road, because I thought they are, especially in a hangar, I can imagine, they're just the loudest damn things.
Yeah, we had a joke that if all the Allies had to do was just lay ceramic across all the battlefiels, and the Germans would have slipped and slid all over the place, unable to run anywhere. and let alone trying to sneak up on somebody. That's forget about it.
Yeah, but at that point, even if you're not dealing with ceramic tile, those things had to be slippery as hell, like on a large rock. Could you imagine running across a battlefield and coming across a 2 foot by 3 foot slimy stone in the fields of France? I'm sure so many of those guys, especially if you're the poor schmucky that's carrying the MG42 or the tripod, running with that 50, 60 pounds worth of hunk of steel in your lap, and then you have to step on a wet stone.
Maybe that's why they'd switch out with Americans the first chance they got.
I'd imagine so. I don't imagine there was a lot of padding on the inside between their sock and whatever screws were holding those knobbles onto the leather sole.
Yeah, well, being a German, that was a unique experience for me because, obviously, but it brought up some really interesting conversations. I had a guy ask me if I had anybody come up to me, not, angry or anything, but any hostile conversations. And I was like, well, I've had people say, how do you feel like in that uniform, And I would just say, well, I'm just representing the enemy that was there. And how do you feel when you see me? Like, how does that make you feel? Like, that's the really good question. Because when you're standing there looking at the table and you're listening to Jeff, and all of a sudden you hear those hobnails on the floor behind you, that there's also that factor of that's kind of eerie, because it's almost got like the a sound of authority, like clink, 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 and it's like can be very ominous sounding. And I would do that on purpose, where I would walk up to people and checking Ausweis bitte, papers please, Ausweis. And people are getting their wristbands and coming up, and I'm standing at the door and checking everybody's stuff,
Well, to that point, let me ask you this, because it's not often I get to ask somebody this. I can remember the first time I did it. I'm sure Jeff remembers the first time he did. I'm sure for you guys it's a little different because you wore real true modern day uniforms. But did you get dressed there or before you got there?
We stayed there that night, so we dressed in the restrooms.
what was your feeling, regardless that it was a German uniform, just for the fact that you had this uniform on, like the first time you put it on and like the public starts showing up? Did you have any weird feeling, like feel out of place? Did you feel like in place? Because I remember like the first event I went to, I got dressed at home and then went. And so like the first time you're out in public, especially you're wearing these uniforms, you feel, for at least for me, the first one or two times, you feel kind of goofy, if you will. But once you get on site and you're in context, it's fine. But
no, I definitely didn't feel goofy because I have a strong chin and I look like a freaking kraut. So when I'm walking around, I was in it, and I was there to give people an experience and to represent the museum, and that's why we were there. And they provided us amazing quarters, and so I was there to make sure everybody had an amazing time, and that they maybe felt the chill when they saw me walking through with, a flat affect and just staring people in the eye, and walking up behind them as they're standing there, and just maybe they could feel that ominous feeling of, geez, like, but, on the other flip side of that, though, and this is more to what you were just saying, my great grandpa was in World War II as well. My dad's grandfather, and he was in the 30th Infantry, and they were known for, they were a rock, right? When the Battle of the Bulge, they plugged the gap. Like, they were the veterans. In France at Mortain, they had single-handedly held many panzer divisions at bay on Hill 314 by themselves, and they're just tremendous warriors, right? And my great grandpa had been in this unit, Frank Sobin, and he was killed in action on October 27th, 1944, and he's buried in Belgium, and there's the Robbie and Frankie Meir family have adopted his grave. But I gotta say that it made me feel, I did feel bad wearing that uniform, and just because it was really kind of brought home, like, this doesn't represent something cool. It doesn't represent something nice. And I'm not trying to say that there was a message that I was portraying, but the uniform that you wear, it does have a swastika on it, and the German eagle clutching that swastika. And it is a military that killed my great grandfather, who's buried in Belgium. So I don't think I'll wear it again, but I'm glad I did, and I gave everybody the experience they wanted, and everybody was impressed, and everybody got the pictures that they wanted, and they couldn't believe a German soldier was there. But I probably won't ever do that again, just because, historically, all the murder and just yeah.
And that's fair.
It was a good experience for me, yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that you went into it like a method actor. I think that makes for a more enjoyable day for the public around you, and for me as a reenactor.
No, I took it very seriously. Yeah,
I did the same thing. Even doing Ally, yeah. I try to treat it like a method acting. At least when the public's around. I try to stay into a somewhat of a character. And
we were very available, Jeff and I, and everybody else that was there. We were very available from sun up to sundown. As long as people were there, we were out and about. We never were out of character. We were never slouched over, just kind of with a hand down our pant pocket or undone, or slovenly looking. We were always sharp, always squared away. I was always walking guard. I was standing at the entrance to the door, standing at the entrance to the thing. Standing over by and so I was always very mindful that I wanted people to get the experience, to see what it was like to be eating a hot dog and look up, and there is a totally decked out, squared away German Wehrmacht soldier standing right there. And there's, what I mean? You can see that people do double takes, because it was jolting to people to see that. Yeah.
And I think it's also important to point out, because I've had to remind some of our younger guys in our group, I'm like, hey, when you're wearing that uniform, even though it's from 80 years ago, and even though you're a living historian, keep in mind that when you're wearing that uniform, you're representing a group of people, even though they're in their 90s now. So when you're wearing that uniform, act as such. Because believe it or not, a lot of these people, especially if you're in your mid-20s, a lot of people come through thinking you're active military and you just put on this 80-year-old uniform on the weekends as part of a a training or a requirement. I can't tell you how many people think that either A, we just show up and there's a trailer outside, we put on uniforms, or B, we're all active service members who are doing this on the weekends. And so I got to remind people, when you're wearing that uniform, act as if, because that uniform represents people. And,
Sure.
and to that point, I have since stopped. Like now, if I get dressed, like before I go to an event, I'll just wear the trousers and the boots. I'll put on a t-shirt, because for me personally, never have served in the military, I have discovered so many people don't know the difference between an 80-year-old uniform and I got so uncomfortable stopping to get gas. Thanks for your service. And I'm a World War II reenactor. I'll pass you. Think I just got to the point now. I'll wear the trousers and the boots. I'll just put on a t-shirt and I'll leave my blouse, my jacket in the car, just because I don't feel comfortable and I don't want to get put into a position where people mistaken me for a active modern day military personnel.
That's very, very commendable. I really appreciate that. And I know even Jeff, when we stopped for gas on the way, Jeff was wearing the uniform, and he didn't want to go in, and he was active duty.
Yeah.
And he is a combat veteran, but he didn't go into the gas station because he didn't want to represent himself as a captain. And especially since the Army has switched back to the uniform, that is
true.
Exactly similar to. So that was very commendable for both you fellas to be honoring the uniform like that, because it's just that extra little bit of detail that shows that how much you guys care and how much I care. That does translate and it exudes out of you, and people know if you're just there, got a mullet and you're wearing a freaking uniform. It's okay, come on now. Or yes, the reason I shaved my beard that I had forever.
If you ever see a picture of me on the internet in civilian clothes and I have the shaved beard and my hair is no longer gray, that means I'm either on my way to reenactment weekend or just got home from one, because I'm the same way. It's like, first and foremost, beards aren't allowed anyhow. But even with my hair, Carrie's like, why do you dye your hair? I'm like, A, it's just hair. And B, I go through the effort of wearing this uniform from 30 yards away with my hair's black. I can pull off mid-30s instead of looking like I'm 60. Obviously when they get close to me, they'll see I'm an old man. But when I'm out there in the field, if I'm doing a battle reenactment, if I'm out in the field, if I don't have the gray hair, at least when people are taking photos, I look closer to the appropriate age for the event. So to me, it's just hair. It'll grow back. So, but to that point, I get so annoyed. I'll show up to a 2-day event. Somebody has their beards, perfect example, the internet meme, no shave November. I can't tell you how many events I've been to. There's some 18, 19-year-old kid there with half a patchy beard. I'm like, why didn't you shave? It's no shave November. It's like, you barely have a beard, fella. I can grow that in 2 days. Just shave it off. I mean, it's just facial hair. Who cares about some internet trend? But yeah, it's so important. It's like, once again, you go through all that effort, energy, and finances to make sure you have the right uniform, the right gear, but then you're going to throw it all away because you don't want to shave.
Well, and people know, and they can see that sincerity. And what ends up happening is what happens to Jeff. People will go home and they'll get stuff out of their archive that they've had in their family history forever. They see that attention to detail, the seriousness, the love of the history, and they'll come up and they'll hand Jeff these amazing articles that have been in their family for generation after generation. And they don't know what to do with it. Maybe their kids aren't into the history thing, and they're worried that it's just going to get put on eBay by somebody who doesn't care. And they see all that attention to detail, which you're talking about, in the uniform, in the appearance, in the displays, in the talk, in the jargon. We're not cussing like sailors when we're there. We're very well spoken when we're there. And we're not, using common slang. We're not using our cell phones. Mm-hmm. And they see that, and people walked up to Jeff. The last 2 times that I've been with Jeff, people have walked up to him and given him artifacts.
To that point, the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was the second year I was in Alabama for it was not the Peleliu, but the Tarawa event. We flew some Japanese reenactors in, but we also had 1 or 2 American-based ones. And one of the American-based guys was squared away, right? Had his Arasaka. He had your standard, got the shelter half laid down with all the paraphernalia laid out, given presentations. One of the local volunteer fire person, I think it was a female, her and her husband worked for the volunteer fire department. They came up talking about the Arasaka. Like, what's, oh, that's Arasaka. Is there much value to it? No, they're good, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, we have one in our family, but we're not firearms enthusiasts. They came back the next day and gave him their damn Arasaka free. No strings. Here you go. We don't like firearms. Have this Arasaka. We know you'll take care of it.
Wow.
It's like, holy crap. So, I mean, I've seen some cool stuff. But so it does happen. And to Jeff's example, as you're pointing out, when you're as squared away and as knowledgeable as Jeff is and make yourself available as Jeff is, that's how you end up finding yourself participating in other people's projects, whether you're being a military advisor or somebody's asking you to help research a particular topic. And so the way you present yourself and the way you show yourself off at these events can oftentimes open up opportunities, because somebody may have an idea, but they don't know where to go to get help. And then they see someone like Jeff standing there with such a beautiful display and knowledge. I wonder if that guy'd be interested in helping. And that's how oftentimes you find yourself in cool situations that's revolved around the hobby.
Well, Tammy, my wife, came across a really neat quote. She read it out loud to me the other day, and I know you two will really appreciate it because it has to do exactly with what we're talking about. She said, "You weren't born too late. You were born now to make sure that other generation doesn't die."
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That really resonated. Because I jokingly say, "Oh, I was born 60 years too late. I should have been born in 1923. I would have been 18 in Pearl Harbor, yada, yada." But thank goodness I wasn't, because, when you experience something, it's never, how we perceive World War II and how the guys that were there perceived it are two different things. They didn't see the glory. They didn't understand that the music they listened to, which was just simply present day music, was going to last for decades and decades and decades. And the style of uniform, and but you wouldn't, when push comes to shove, you wouldn't want to be one of those. You wouldn't want to have had to live through the Depression. You wouldn't have wanted to live where the entire world is at war. And I mean, it was terrible stuff. And they just did a job. And so, I kind of jokingly say that, but no, at the same time, I'm very fortunate that, I'm in the position I'm in the time that I live in, to make sure that's not forgotten, because because we care about it so much, and that's why it's like old hat to when you talk to these guys, oh man, what was it like? It's like, I don't know, it was what it was. Like, it's nothing special to them, but for guys like us and our listeners, it has some sort of magic to it, or some kind of majesty, to the experience, to the uniform, to the aircraft, to the music, that whole compilation of what it's like and what we would like to surround ourselves with. When we listen to it and when they listen to it, it's totally different. And I'm thankful that I'm in the position to see all the good, the good feelings that it can kind of, bring up, as opposed to the all-out terror that it really truly was.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, now would be a good time to lay some history on some folks. So we're going to hand it over to Jeff, and he's going to talk to you about a campaign or part of a campaign that I don't think we've ever broached on this podcast. We've done a whole lot on ETO, a whole lot on the Pacific, but the Mediterranean, the African campaigns, things like that, we have yet to really touch on in any in-depth. So maybe this will be a new chapter, or at least a look into, and hopefully we can come down the pike with more of this content.
Yeah, and I'm certainly hoping that our listeners will chime in with questions or comments, or, for those of you listening that know more about this than we do, and would like to, contribute, please let us know. So, like Don mentioned earlier, so a week from right now, I'll be traveling to Greece as, a teacher that linked up with a company out of Austin. And I'm taking 6 students with me. Most of them are seniors. One of them is my son. Um, and it's something that my high school has done for over 20 years. And by one of the history teachers, he's done it for many, many years, with the exception of the COVID years, of course. And as he is, getting older, doesn't want to travel as much, got grandkids and everything, he kind of passed it to me, kind of a passing of the torch to keep the legacy alive, because he said he's taken over 200 students from our high school abroad,
Wow.
which in a high school that never has more than about 1,100 students at any given time, that's a big deal. That's a big deal because it's not cheap, but it's really special, and I'm just so thankful to him and the opportunity that I have. So, I get to pick the location. You can go most places in the world, and so I thought, let's start in the beginning, right? The birthplace of democracy. So I put a Greece trip together and had 6 students that are just super pumped that we leave, next week. And so as we're getting this close, the tour director, you get assigned somebody who lives there, and this girl is literally going to basically latch on to our group. And she'll be at the hotels with us, on the bus with us, everywhere. She's in charge of making sure we have a great time. That's on top of the tour guides, things like that. So she is our tour director. And she had reached out to me and said that, if there's anything special you want to see, there's some days where we've got some afternoons free. And, if some of the students don't want to go here, if they want to go somewhere else, you just let me know. And I thought, oh, okay. So we're going to Athens, Delphi, Medora, the monastery in the sky, up to Thermopylae, way up and over to Thessaloniki, and back down to Athens. So pretty good chunk of mainland Greece, not going to Sparta or anything like that. Um, I'm most especially excited about Thessaloniki, headquarters to Alexander the Great. But when she asked if there was anything specific I wanted to see, the wheels started turning. Okay, the only thing I know about Greece in World War II is that the Germans occupied it. That's the extent of my knowledge of the Greek campaign. So I thought, okay, this is a great time for me to learn a few things, do a little research, and I sent her some things and some suggestions, and I cannot wait to see what she pulls up for us. But what I wanted to share with the listeners was something that I thought was very interesting. That, yeah, we know we haven't talked about it on this podcast. It's hardly talked about ever, but I think it deserves mention. And this comes from the Washington Oxy Day Foundation. Oxy, O-X-I. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because it is a Greek word. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. So, Anything But Trivial is the title of this article. Forgotten Facts About Greece in World War II. More of Hitler's troops died in one day on Crete, Greece, than in any single day in the 15 months prior in 11 countries.
Wow.
More of Hitler's troops died in one day on Crete than in any other day in the past 15 months and in 11 other countries. That blew my mind. It says here, overall, 1 out of 10 Greeks gave their lives during World War II. Adolf Hitler said the Greek soldier, above all, fought with the most courage. And Winston Churchill said, hence, we will not say that Greeks fight like heroes, but that heroes fight like Greeks.
Wow.
It gets more interesting. Greece's disruption of Hitler's war timetable forced him into the debilitating Russian winter where he met defeat. Leaders like Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, America's Sumner Welles, and even Adolf Hitler's chief of staff, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, credit Greece with bringing about Hitler's defeat. Keitel said the Greeks delayed by 2 or more vital months the German attack against Russia. If we did not have this long delay, the outcome of the war would have been different. Greece was the only David in World War II able to inflict a fatal wound that eventually brought down the Nazi Goliath.
Jeez.
President Franklin Roosevelt said, when the entire world had lost all hope, the Greek people dared to question the invincibility of the German monster, raising against it the proud spirit of freedom. Hitler had previously soundly defeated France and routed the army of Great Britain, 2 of the world's great powers. Life magazine and publications around the world featured Greece on their covers. Now, Oxy Day is that was another, like, okay, another little rabbit hole. What exactly does that mean? What's the story of Oxy Day? And it says here, as the free world watched as one by one countries across Europe surrendered to Hitler's Axis forces at 3 a.m. on October 28, 1940, a representative of the Axis forces arrived at the Greek prime minister's residence and demanded Greece's surrender. The prime minister replied with one single word: Oxy. No.
Huh.
A
Wow.
few hours later, the Axis forces descended on Greece, expecting that it would quickly fall. But the Greek resistance forced Hitler to change his plans. News of Greece's victory flooded the radio airwaves and covered the front pages of newspapers around the globe. A grateful world celebrated. No one expected such a small nation to derail the seemingly unstoppable Axis forces.
Wow.
I am very excited for next week because I will certainly do what I can to capture some good video content of me at some of these places, potentially where Panzers came through some of these gaps. Dennis, I mentioned to you earlier, I've seen pictures of the Ju-88s and the Stukas and the
Sure.
Do-17s flying over, the Parthenon. Um, but this was a big deal. And yeah, Greece fell pretty quickly, but so costly. Um, and it's not talked about,
Yeah.
To that
Hmm.
you
point, for
know?
the audience listening at home, here's a fun thought experiment because I just did it and I couldn't do it. Close your eyes and in your mind, try to envision what the Greek infantry uniform looks like. You can't because no one ever talks about it. I just Google searched it. If you saw it in passing, you would think it's a Russian uniform. I mean, it's. I never even. I like I said, I couldn't even imagine what their uniforms in World War II look like because so little pop culture. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there you'd have to dig for them, but when's the last time you've seen, oh, you got to watch this World War II movie? It takes place in Greece. I never heard anybody say that. So, yeah, I mean, to that point, that we often talk about how there's so many stories and so many campaigns and so many people who fought in the war that don't get talked about, that a lot of focus gets put on other campaigns. Here's a perfect example, as Jeff says, here's another great campaign that we know little about because it just didn't get the coverage.
I'm looking forward to seeing you shooting video wearing a What's the Scuttlebutt t-shirt in one of those gaps in Greece, talking about with Panzers coming through there. That's going to be
Yeah.
amazing. I'm looking forward to that. Jeez.
Yeah, and you can do a quick Google search and find some maps of Hitler's invasion of the lower countries through there and Albania and Yugoslavia, and you kind of get the idea that I mean, I think most people know Greece is a pretty rugged country, from a topographical standpoint. So when you think of armored columns coming through, gosh, I mean, there's got to be only so many places
Yeah.
to be able to get all the way down, to get to Athens, right? I mean, that's not in the northern part of the country. So, what does that look like? I'm curious. Like I said, you kind of just see coming in, but there's really only one or two routes. But I just got a kick out of the prime minister response. I mean, is that almost not like, deputy commander of the airborne at Bastow?
Yeah.
Nuts, like,
Nuts.
no,
No.
we're not giving in.
Sometimes the
Um,
simplest answers don't need any elaboration. No. You want to
Yeah.
say anything
Now it's
else?
no. Now
No.
it's no. It's
Let's
no. It's known as No Day now.
yeah. Let's save
yeah,
on ink and time. I don't need to.
C Day.
Yeah. No need to type it up. Just no.
yeah.
No.
That's awesome.
So, if any listeners, if they've got anything to add, if there's some great things that we just don't know about, great ways for research, or maybe there has been a documentary or two, an independent film, a short story, maybe there's a short story that needs to be written. I'm interested in what anybody else has to say about it because, again, it's so overshadowed, but I feel like it's feel like it's pretty important.
Yeah.
You know, hearing some of those big people talking about it between Churchill and Roosevelt. I mean, my goodness.
Especially the
It's
fact
almost
that
like the Alamo.
the
You know,
fact that
the Alamo fell.
that many
but
Germans
it afforded
died
the
on an
time.
island that was 113 miles long by, I think, 35 miles wide at the widest. I think the total landmass of Crete is 3,225 square feet. So
Is Crete its own country?
it's an island.
Is it part of Greece?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know that geography.
Yeah, it's under the purview of Greece, but it's an island in itself.
I remember seeing, I don't know if it was that World at War documentary, which, by the way, folks, if you have not seen, a lot of it is narrated by Sir Laurence Olivier. And a lot of the key players, I'm talking hundreds of the key players on all sides, are interviewed in this series. It's amazing. But they do show some very significant footage of Crete and Greece just being bombed relentlessly, and people emerging from these hovels that they've created of stone and coming up and putting their flags back up and putting their bread stands back out of defiance. It's just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I love when you see that, and then you got the guy who pulls out the broom. Like, yeah,
Just starts sweeping. Oh,
you're
man.
not gonna hold me down.
Goodness.
That's an example of a great show and production to watch. I'm gonna give you guys a 2-minute example of a movie not to waste your time on. I was sick a few weeks ago, and Jeff and Dennis held things down, and thank for them for doing that. The night before, I'm laying in bed and I'm feeling like crap, and Carrie's on the TV, and she knows I love World War II stuff. And she knows I've seen just about everything on the major channels, and she's like, "Here's a World War II movie on Hulu. You want me to add it to your list?" And I got my contacts out. I'm trying to sleep. And I put my glasses on, and I look at the TV, and it's this movie called 3 Days in Malay. And she reads the description to me before I put my glasses on.
Oh, I know where this is going.
And she reads this description of 3 Days in Malay, which is a 2023 movie that is out on Hulu. And it's a small group must defend the airfield for 3 days against a Japanese assault during the fight for Malay in World War II. And it talks about this Marine squadron. And I'm like, not familiar with that. I put on my glasses. I look up at the splash screen where they have the thumbnail for the movie. And it says 3 Day Malay and has a description, United States Marine, blah, blah, blah. And then they show this photo, which is overhead. And all you see is the 1932 haversacks that the Army wears, the horrible one. The netted helmets. And I told her, I said, I'm not watching that. She's like, why is that? I said, because you just read me a description of the Marine Corps, yet they have 2 Army soldiers in European theater of operations with the net helmet and everything. I said, they didn't wear the... She's like, well, isn't the Army in the Pacific? I said, yeah, they didn't wear the helmet nettings.
Oh, it wasn't the flag, the wrong flag. It was.
I didn't even pay that attention to that, but
50
I just
star.
saw...
It was a 50-star flag.
I just saw 2 Army soldiers in ETO uniforms in a movie about Marines in the Pacific, and that was all I needed. She's like, well, let's turn it on just to see what it's like. So they turn it on, and the very opening scene is this Japanese trudge, and it's real dark, but I'm like, those uniforms just don't look right. And I'm all trying to get to the TV, and they cut to the next scene, and they're at this Pacific base, and it's a wide shot, beautiful wide shot. They had this table set up, this nurse sitting there in her Army uniform, and they show these Marines walking by, and I'm like, why are they wearing jump boots? Marines walking by, like, why are they wearing black jump boots? And one of the stars walks up, green HBT, but you can see the 4 stitching holes on the buttons. I'm like, the HBTs had riveted, and I lean forward and he turns. He's got these bright yellow sergeant chevrons, bright yellow. I'm like, that's late Vietnam. They had these guys in mid 1980s like Army uniforms, like you see them wearing in like Iron Eagle. Like they weren't even World War II era freaking uniforms. They had them in the black 1980s Cochrane jump boots. They had them in cotton HBT green pants with the cargo on them. They had them with the bright yellow nameplates from post-Vietnam. They had the bright yellow chevrons. And then they cut to another scene. The guys are all Oh, they cut to the scene where the sergeant's got his beard going, and I'll send you the photo. I went back after I told you guys briefly. The guy who's playing the 1-star general, he's in there. He's got like on this horrible imitation Eisenhower jacket with like 1 star on each shoulder. They got him with an M1 helmet lying around with the chin strap choking his head off. He looks like Doofy on Scary Movie. He's got 1 big star in the middle. It looks like someone's high school like movie project. It was the worst. And the sergeant's like screaming. I'm like, why is a sergeant screaming out 1-star general? And then I was like, I gotta go to bed. And then they cut to the guys like working out, and they got on black Hanes t-shirts. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I've since seen someone else complain about this movie on Twitter. So unless you guys are just wanting to watch this rubbish ass movie for the fun of it, to make fun of it, just go ahead and remove 3 Days in Malay from your Hoodoo playlist, because it is the biggest piece. Like, they didn't even bother. I guess they didn't even have even someone of military like historian who just wanted a film credit. They couldn't find anybody. It's like they just went on like Alibaba or like one of those military surplus stores and just bought whatever uniform they could get in bulk. Like, hey, they got 83 pair of black cotton jump boots from 1984. Cool. So they just bought whatever uniform they could find. And then the best part is, I didn't even get this far, but I went and looked at the screenshots. In the combat scenes, they got them with the early 80s uniforms, but then they got the leggings tied on over their black cotton jump boots. So then they put leggings and like reenactment like M1 belts and really bad suspenders on it. So at some point they end up slapping army uniform web gear on these Marines in their 1980s army. I can't believe this thing even got financed. It's ranking as the worst World War II quote unquote movie. Because if they didn't even say World War II, you would have just thought this was just some random HBO movie that takes place in the 80s somewhere. It's just horrible. So that's an example of a movie not to watch. Jeff, I see you got a sweet book behind you, fella. What you reading?
Huh. So I'm still reading Harry Crosby's A Wing and a Prayer. After watching Masters for the second time, I had to revisit this book. And Don, I know you weren't with us the last episode, but I kind of touched on it. I read this book, probably the first book I read about the air war or even the ETO in general. And I want to say I was about 15 when I read it. And I mean, I remembered bits and pieces of it, especially watching Masters. I was like, oh man, I kind of remember that. I remembered it from his memoir, but other than that, a lot of it was just way over my head. And I read, there was a chapter I went through just a couple days ago, and if you'll indulge me, there's a couple paragraphs I want to read here. I think you guys will find it interesting. He's already group navigator at this time, and he's having a hard time kind of fitting in. He's not the raunch, the cocky, braggadocio that the Buckies were. He's kind of a pretty squared away guy. And he says here that he said, I felt strange about having a good time in England. Okay, we were flying combat. Okay, the 8th Air Force combat losses were higher than those of any other military service. Our one Air Force, the 8th, was losing more men than the entire U.S. Navy. When I was flying on a crew, my whole life was flying and recovering from it. I lived with combat crews. I ate with them in the flying mess with the fresh eggs, Canadian bacon, and fresh orange juice. When I joined Eager Beaver Blakely's crew, I spent most of my time in training, and I was exhausted. As my mission stretched out and I flew less often, I missed my friends who went down. When I went on pass, I usually checked in at a Red Cross club and spent most of my time sleeping, trying to recover from the exhaustion of altitude, responsibility, and loss. It didn't seem right that after a mission I could go down to London and see a stage show. The GIs on Guam or at Kiska spent the night in their foxholes. It got to me. Now that I was group navigator, I might lead a task force to Germany and then not fly a mission for a month. During that month, my friends went down or home. When I thought of my friends, Sergeant Lyle Nord, Hambone, Brady, Charlie Villa, Ernie Warsaw, Jim Scott, or Sumner Reeder, I had to sort them out. KIA, MIA, POW, stateside hospital, interned in Switzerland, or rotated. It got to me. I found myself rather numb to it all. I did my job, but I don't remember much of it. So we talk a lot about the Band of Brothers and the Pacific and LCI 449. But the Air Forces, the Army Air Forces in Europe was really a special, unique case because they lived in very different realms, throughout the day, very different worlds that they visited. And Harry Crowley talks about that. And some days he's, 5 miles up, and then he comes back, and then he's in a pub in London, or he's, wrapped in a letter from his wife, and he's back home in his mind. And that back and forth is I know that's tough. I mean, I'm not going to say I think that's tough. I know that's tough. I remember being rotated home for 10 days in the heart of my deployment, and it was the absolute worst possible thing they could have done. Did I need a break? Probably. Did I want to go home? Absolutely. But it wasn't a day or so later. I'm thinking, oh, I got to get back. Like, I got to get back because here I am and I'm hanging out with my girlfriend and her family and my parents, and we're eating dinner like normal human beings. And I don't know what's going on with my guys. Oh, how many car bombs have gone off since then? Are they okay? And here I am, some sad sack in the States. And then like you're already scared to go over, and then you got to do it again. Like if you just go over once, that's enough. So I couldn't imagine that going up into that cold blue and then freezing your tail off, and now you're in a warm pub with some pretty red house girl on your sleeve, and then that red light goes on, and you got to do this crap again, and then you look around and the guys here partying and drinking and ordering a double double, and they may not be here tomorrow, and but you may be, and then you're playing cards and you're back in a warm, it's just that back and forth just had to have really taken its toll emotionally and physically and spiritually even for some of these guys. And it's an interesting part of Harry's book. It must read for anybody interested in World War II in general. I mean, it's one of the best memoirs out there, hands down.
Speaking of Masters of the Air, did you reveal to our audience your Masters of the Air hack?
I did not.
Maybe I'm like looking online because I'm going to do the same thing. So maybe you should share the audience how you were able, as someone who does not have Apple Plus, to watch Masters of the Air twice. Share the love.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're looking at a cheapskate, right? I mean, yeah, I know I got a lot of nice things. So, thanks to our wingman Dennis the chin blocker, because he does have Apple TV, and so I got to just totally binge watch it with him, a few weekends ago.
Yeah, that was
so
epic.
and it wasn't enough, right? Like okay, I need to watch this again. My wife needs to see this with me. So I did the whole stupid sign up for Apple TV thing, right? And the free trial.
Yeah.
We got through the first 2 episodes. And then the next day I tried to sign in again. It said I didn't exist.
Oh, bastards.
So, yeah. It was like, this is not an Apple. And, like, you just kept getting this loop of, like, sign in. Like, no, I'm not trying to sign in. Let me change my password. Oh, you changed your password. Okay, sign in. Oh, no, you don't exist. I don't even know if they've been charging me. Like, I have no clue. So, screw crap TV. I got pretty frustrated because it wasn't like I didn't get to watch it, but we got to watch the first 2 episodes, and my wife was like, I need more. And I'm like, I know. So I just Googled, like, is there a DVD out there, and is it, like, not pirated? And
boy, is there.
I'll be honest. Maybe mine's pirated. It doesn't seem like it. It came through a seller from Walmart.com. Not that I ever like to go to Walmart, give them money, but hey, $20 online, and it was here in a couple days.
Yeah,
Watch the whole thing.
Now
20.
The one on Walmart is not the Blu-ray, but when you're dealing with Blu-ray, you run the risk of the rain-free stuff. But yeah, you can still get on Walmart. I'm actually buying one right now on eBay. $14.99 free shipping. So I mean, yeah. So if you guys don't want to sign up for Apple Plus and all that nonsense, just go online. And that's insane because I think what Band of Brothers was like $60 for the box set. The Pacific was more than. I mean, I don't know because I got both of mine as a gift from when I worked in radio. My boss bought them for me for Christmas. But I know when they first came out, they were by no means cheap. And so the fact that you can get Masters of the Air right now, within the same year it came out for $15, like what more do you need to know? So, yeah.
I know. I did, when I revealed it on social, and I literally had people from several countries going, "Is that for real? Is that for real?" I'm like, yes. Now, it's not. Yeah, when Band of Brothers came out, you don't, like, I have the metal tin version of the Pacific and Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife bought me a real nice, like, box set of both of them packaged together, like, in this amazing box. So, yeah, you're going to get one single DVD plastic cover with 3 discs inside. And the discs have pictures on them, right? Like they're not just like a blank disc. But I mean, who cares, right? Who cares what the box is? Because you're not watching the box; you're watching the film.
And to that point, as you were kind of joking on earlier, you're better off getting this stuff on DVD. I know DVD is an antiquated format, but I've seen so many videos where these young cats who spent all this money buying digital DVDs. And then they found out, hey, my digital DVD apparently had a shelf life because I can no longer download it and watch it with my code. And so people learning the hard way. In this closet right in front of me from back when I couldn't afford cable 15 years ago, we would just go to Walmart on Tuesday and buy $4 DVDs. I got 200 DVDs right in front of me. Cable went out during Hurricane Irma for 16 days. And my neighbor hooked up my power to his generator where I could power my refrigerator, one TV, and an Xbox. Guess who had WKRP in Cincinnati, the full series on box set? This guy. So, we were able to watch all... Because check this out. Fun fact.
Cincinnati.
I don't care if you got an Xbox One. I don't care if you have the DVD for it. Without internet, you can't play that stuff. I couldn't play Fallout even though I had the DVD because you had to synchronize online. So even without internet, your video game consoles are dead in the water. So what better to have DVD movies around so you can entertain yourself when you want. And back to what we were saying earlier, you actually get your money's worth because that DVD, unless your kid scratches it's around until you no longer can get a player. But I mean, records coming back, so I don't see DVD players going anywhere too long. But yeah, that's our little diatribe. We want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us for another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We do want to remind you, head over to WTSPWWII.com. Sign up and subscribe to Patreon. If you're a Patreon member, check your inbox. The second batch of stickers got shipped out today. I think we got about one more batch to go. And then I'm going to send Dennis his share. I just got to, order some more ink. Actually, not ink. I've actually already gone through. I'm already on my second set of toners, ink cartridges since we started this thing, and my third pack of stickers. But the good news is, unbeknownst to me, when I bought this HP, I get a year worth of free ink on their subscription service, and then after that, it's $6 a month. So right now, we're printing to the moon because ink's not costing us a damn thing. We're just buying paper. So. Now's the time to print up stickers and get this cookie factory going. But so head over to whatsthescuttlebutt.com or WTSPWorldWar2.com. Click on the Patreon link. Sign up, subscribe. It's $1 a month. It goes a long way to help us out. We're going to do another giveaway here soon. I was thinking today, maybe on the next giveaway, we give away... Well... Yeah, we'll give it away. You guys can keep it in your closet until wintertime, or if you're like me and your AC at your work set to 63. I'm thinking because I haven't seen them in person, I want to give away one of the WTSP hoodies. I think that'd be a cool one to give away. Everybody loves a good hoodie, even if it's summertime in Texas. I mean, you always can have a hoodie. So I think maybe the next giveaway, we'll give away a hoodie of their choice. But yeah. So make sure you head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Also, send us an email at mail call at WTSPWorldWar2.com. Let us know about topics, subjects, or hey, maybe you are a self-proclaimed expert on a particular campaign that we haven't talked ad nauseum about, whether it's Africa, Greece, Italy, other parts of the world. Maybe you're one of those reenactors who that's your thing. You like the little niche stuff that no one talks about. You think you can do good 35, 45 minutes, please reach out to us. We'll get you on a schedule. We'll bring you on the show, and you can spread some wisdom to our audience. And speaking of spreading wisdom to our audience, stick around, because coming up next is a one-on-one interview with me and Kristof over in Belgium, talking about his statues and plaques that he is getting. Actually, they've already been funded. He's in the planning stages, and if you want to learn about how you go about getting statues built in Belgium, we're going to tell you. Stick around, and thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you all next week.
The old craft music hall, friends, cutting out by shortwave for spots all over the world where our men and women in uniform are making history. Speaking of women in uniform, soldiers back from North Africa have nothing but admiration and praise for the work and the courage of the officers and enlisted personnel of the Women's Army Corps, the WAC. As fast as they can be trained, women of the WAC are relieving soldiers for active duty. Originally planned as a corps of 25,000, the WAC now wants 200,000, which shows you how valuable the Army thinks the gals are. Talking to a colonel the other day, and he told me how happy he was to see some knob-knuckled staff sergeant who took all day to type a report freed to fire a bazooka while an efficient member of the WAC took over his portable. The WAC just doesn't handle the Army's typing. Members of the WAC are trained in 155 different types of Army work, all the way from Air Force to X-ray. Members of the WAC learn trades and careers that'll serve them well beyond the duration in 6 months. And when it's all over, members of the WAC can say proudly that they wore the uniform of the United States Army in the war for the survival of freedom. They wear the Army uniform, they get the Army pay, and every officer in the WAC comes up through the ranks the hard way. There's no finer way to serve your country. So if you're not now working in a war plant, if you're 20 to 50 years of age, with no children under 14, and you want to help our men to victory and speed them back, join the WAC. It's easy to do at any WAC recruiting office. Or write the Women's Army Corps, Washington, D.C., for a booklet that'll give you all the dope you need.
WLVN 1940s Radio, the place to go if you want authentic, real-time 1940s music, sports events, news, and much more. If you have a World War II event coming up, and as much of us do at our Living History events, sometimes we get a nice old-fashioned radio, we'll put a Bluetooth speaker in it, and we'll stream some appropriate music. Problem is every once in a while when you're streaming that music, a Pandora ad might kick in, or a YouTube ad, or whatever host commercial from where you're playing this music, unless you've taken the time to record your own music and save it as a file. We can do you one better. Head over to WLVN 1940s Radio, or simply click the link on our website. Go and stream their music live. Thanks to the station manager over at WLVM, Mr. Anthony Leota, who has painstakingly taken his time to get authentic sports events, radio broadcasts, news broadcasts from the time, and he builds a radio station in real time, just like a modern-day radio station. Modern-day radio stations has an entire schedule built from 12 a.m. until 12 a.m. the following day of all the music, commercial spots, and stories that are going to be ran throughout the day. Anthony has done the same thing, except for his music comes from the 1940s and 1930s. His news reports are actual news reports that were archived from the 1940s. His sporting events are actually archived from the 1940s. So if you want a very authentic, very original concept way to listen to music and content from the 1940s, head over to WLVN1940sradio.com. And now we are sitting down with a one-on-one interview with a listener and someone who reached out to me on Facebook who has a very interesting and, quite honestly, a beautiful passion for what he's trying to do. And this is another one of those examples, a reminder to me, Jeff and Dennis, and that we aren't just talking into some microphones in a room for us. We have people not only around the country, but all around the world. And so I'm recording on a rare 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon so that we can make the time zones meet up, make it more accommodating for the both of us. But joining us today is Kristof. Kristof has a passion for World War II. And we all take our passion and we use it in different ways. Myself, Jeff, Dennis, we do it in Living History, hosting a podcast, writing books. And then there's others who actually do a more tangible, worldwide, more widespread, way of preserving history. And that is through landmarks, plaques, statues, things of that nature. Things that affect them personally because they have a passion, but quite honestly affect more people, because more people are going to see these things that they participate in and that they are responsible to bring into life. And so this is just a small example for our audience. Whenever you're out at a park, a museum, or whatever, a roadside attraction, or you're just driving down the street and you see a historical marker or a plaque, that historical marker, that plaque, that artifact, whatever it may be, was brought to you in part by a person or a small group of people in an effort to preserve history, and exactly what Kristof is doing. Kristof, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm quite well. For those of you listening to the audio, I'll probably post a video format of this, strictly because all the artifact that Kristof has in his attic, he was explaining to me before the show. We see the 101st Screaming Eagle. Much like myself with my mannequin Steve, Kristof has someone behind him over his shoulder. Looks like he almost has a pilot's headset. What's your...
He's a B-17 waist gunner.
Oh, Jeff would be so jealous. Is that reproduction uniform? Is that original?
No, it's all original.
Wow. How common is the original stuff over in Europe and Germany nowadays in 2024? Or did you find that there was more of it back in the early 2000s and in the 90s?
There was a lot more back in the 90s. Sometimes you can be lucky and find some stuff at the flea market. But most of the things we buy or I buy are at military fairs. So, and like everything, prices are going well up the last couple of years. So,
not only add the rarity, but add the worldwide inflation on everything. Everything's getting more expensive. I realized in the mid-2000s, as a living historian, obviously I have original stuff, but when you're out doing reenactments, you don't want to be rolling around on the grass with an original haversack. But what I had found is when you go to flea markets and you're lucky, or you go to that military store and you're lucky and you actually find an original artifact, a lot of its stuff at the time was cheaper than the reproduction stuff. So, you'd go drop $50, $60, $70 on a haversack and you can find original somewhere in an antique store for $38. You're like, okay, right. So yeah, I'm just going to add this to the collection even though I don't need it. But everything's getting more and more expensive. In your experience, I would imagine, this is the interesting difference between America and basically any other country outside of the Western Hemisphere, especially when it comes to World War II, World War I, even Vietnam, Korean War. All these conflicts happened elsewhere. And as we've seen recently with how the United States pulled forces out of the Middle East, oftentimes we just leave crap laying everywhere because it's more expensive to bring it home. I would anticipate that at least through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was probably a lot easier to find these World War II and military-based artifacts throughout Europe than it obviously was here, because it was leaving here and going there, and it very rarely came back. Was the market pretty much flooded back in the day?
Well, I have to say that's a little bit before my time, but from the older collectors, I know stuff was everywhere in overstocks that sold all stuff from the 40s. So, yeah.
We had
sometimes you can get lucky when you visit farms or people who are hoarding like a garage sale, but it's getting very rare to find some stuff in the wild these days.
Yeah, it's crazy to think as us as collectors how throwaway this stuff was. We had Wild Bill Garnier's son and granddaughter on here, and his son was explaining, my dad and his friends came back. They had so many Lugers, they were just taking them apart and throwing them in the trash can. They were just like, here. It was like having too many socks. They just had all this stuff everywhere that back in the day, it meant nothing. And they were literally just dismantling them, trying to get it out of the house because the wife didn't want it around anymore. And nowadays we're like, I would just want one of those things that you're taking apart and throwing in the trash can. It's insane to think.
Probably we are throwing stuff away these days that in 50 years they're going to be looking for somehow. So
I would like to think that, but let's be honest, our stuff's plastic cheap. It's made to fall apart in 2 years, so you have to buy a new version anyhow. Or if it's a smart device, they dumb it down and force you to buy something new because they slow the device down in order to sell you a new product. But we're not here to talk about the inconsistencies of modern-day technology. bring our audience up to date to something you reached out to me for. Unfortunately, we couldn't get you on in time for your fundraiser, but it doesn't matter because you met your fundraising expectations. Yeah. But we still want to share to the audience what you're doing, what your passion is. But kind of like we do with a lot of our guests, rewind and just give us a brief overview of how you personally got into not only World War II, but this particular segment of what you ended up raising money for.
Yes. So when I moved to WTSPWWII, the town where I live now, I got interested in the local history. And they told me, did you know we had some Americans staying at the castle here in WTSPWWII? I didn't know anything about it, so I started my research. And in October 17th, 1944, we had a crash landing in a village a couple of miles away from here, but the crew parachuted out. So they stayed in our village for a couple of days. So that's how I got into this story, particular.
Is there anyone in your village that's still around who maybe was a child during the crash landings and when the pilots were in the village?
Not in my town. I believe the last eyewitness of the people staying in the castle passed away a couple of years ago. But in the town of the crash landing, I think we have 2 or 3 eyewitnesses still alive. So it was very interesting meeting them and hearing their side of the story. And yeah.
So what was the story? Did the town help hide them? Was there, a fight for survival? What's the background of these of the downed aircrew in the village?
Well, I guess they were lucky because we had just been liberated a month before. So I'll quickly tell the mission. So they had to fly to Cologne to bomb marshalling yards. They got hit by a 88 centimeter German flak. So the engine, one of the engines was on fire. The pilot dived down in an attempt to extinguish the fire, which he succeeded. But then one of the props started windmilling, and he couldn't get it into vane position. So the crew started throwing out everything to try and reach England, but unfortunately they didn't make it. Once they were sure they were over Allied territory, the pilots gave the crew the signal to bail out. Normally, the pilot and the co-pilot were also going to bail out, but one of the guys, he had an accident and the ripcord was pulled inside the airplane.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So the parachute opened up. He grabbed it. He said he was going to jump like that through the bomb bay, but the pilot said that's too dangerous. So he gave his parachute, and he said, "I'm going to try and make a crash landing, emergency landing." So the crew bailed out. They ended up in my village, and the pilot and the co-pilot made a successful emergency landing, I think about 15 miles away from here. The crew members who bailed out, they were rounded up by a Canadian outfit who stayed at our local castle, brought them here, and the pilots, I couldn't find where they stayed, but they didn't get back together until they were reunited in England after a couple of days.
And so when you reached out to me, you had a fundraising goal for a project you were putting together, which I thought was, as I opened up the show, explained to the audience that when you drive around, you see these features that they don't just appear because the government does it, or they don't just appear out of nowhere. Someone with a passion for the story and the site has to bring these things together and to make them happen. What was the idea that you came up with, and what sort of steps and hoops did you have to jump through to make this happen?
Well, it was a big process. It started small with an article I wrote for a local heritage magazine. And then I think 2 or 3 years later, Dirk reached out to me because he was doing research to the same crew. And we started finding more and more information, and we put it together in a book. So then, I believe in 2020, we did a book presentation, which had local mayors in the public.
What was the name of the book?
It's called Perry Powell's Crew. It tells everything about the crew when they started training, how they came over to Europe, all their missions. Yeah, what was important for me was to add some pages with their personal stories, so people can see they were just people like us with dreams and everything. So it weren't just military men; they were just people like everyone.
I think
So yeah.
I think that's how a lot of us get into this hobby, or not even a hobby, but the passion for World War II. Yeah, you have the people who like the technology of the vehicles and, you know, the logistics and the military side of it, the movement and all that. But I think a majority of the people who have the unexplainable passion for World War II, it's because we read these books that are written in the first person or in a third person about a group of people. And it's not just dates, numbers, you know, objects and missions. I think so many of us, and I think that's why like Band of Brothers, the Pacific Masters of the Air, I think that's why they reach out to the broader audience who wouldn't say they have a passion for World War II. But I think it's the shining the spotlight on the people who participated in those activities and reminding people that they existed, they were real people. And let's be honest, in most cases, they were really young men. Prior to the war, most people would call them boys. After the war and during the war, they became men. And as we get older and we have kids, like my kid's 17, I ask them to take out the trash, they give me attitude. These kids are getting up and either defending their country or fighting for their country or doing what they have to do to survive at that same age. And I think that's one of the things that opens up World War II and large conflicts like that to the general audience. And I think what you did and your desire to put that personal aspect in that book was probably very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me personally, I got interested in the Second World War because my grandfather would always tell the stories, and he would start crying. So that made a big impression on me, and I believe, like you said, the personal stories make the impressions. You need to have some kind of extra information about the technology and strategy to understand a little bit what was going on, but it's the personal stories that are gripping your attention, and they can make you sad or they can make you happy. It's life.
And it goes a long way to remind us how bad we don't have things. Our lives are pretty damn good, comparatively speaking. So, we've hinted around to it. Give the audience more detail on this project that you took on and the steps that you had to go to facilitate it and to reach your goals.
Right. So after the book presentation, the major from Wichelen, where the plane made an emergency landing, he asked if we could do something for the 80th anniversary of the liberation. So, and the central team would be the crew of the crash landing. So that started a very long process. We're going to have a 3-day event in Belgium where we're going to reveal a life-size statue of the two pilots, showing them right after the crash landing. So when I made the landing, two P-51s were circling around, and the pilots climbed on the airplane on the B-17, and they waved to signal that everything was okay. So that's going to be the statue we're going to put here in Belgium. But then, during my research, I came in contact with most of the families from the crew members. So we thought it would be interesting to invite them. But I wanted to make it a little bit more special. So we're going to start in England at the airbase where they were stationed. We're going to come to Belgium, and then we're going to end up in Germany, where sadly they were killed on their 24th mission.
What was the name of the airbase that they flew out of, and is it a historical site, or is there still something functioning there now?
Yeah, it's in Nuttenstead. It's close to London. Um, there's a small museum dedicated to the 398 bomb group and the 55th fighter group, who was stationed there before the B-17s. Next to the museum, you have the Woodman Inn, which was a pub at the time, so a lot of the officers went there. That's an interesting place to visit. And there's still a very small airfield for like hobby pilots over there.
I have interest in the production side of things, and I want to back up real quick. You said you guys have a desire to have a statue recreating the pilot standing on the B-17. When I hear things like that, I'm like, well, how does this get done? Where do you find, is there like a website of like, hey, here's a bunch of known statue artists? Where do you find an artist who has the ability to bring forth your vision into statue form? I mean, how does that even start? Where do you begin to look for an artist to create a statue?
Well, because the local town government is paying for the statue in Belgium. So we had to write some sort of work description, put it out there, and then people had to bring in their offers, what they could make for us, what the cost price would be, and then we had to make a selection. So we found an artist who meets the requirements, and I just saw a preview a couple of days ago, and it's gonna look good. So
what's the scale of this statue? What's the overall height, width?
So it's a life-size statue. I think it's gonna be about 1 meter 85 centimeters. So I'm not sure how much that's in feet or inches.
Yeah, our audience can get out Google and do the conversion on that. Now, you said it's going to be both pilots?
Yeah, exactly.
And are they just going to create like a 5-foot span of the surface of the B-17, or how are they going to, or are they just going to put, is it going to be up on a kind of like a marble slab? What's the base?
So they're going to be placed on steps. So the plane landed next to a river, the Scheldt River.
Okay.
So they're going to be facing on it's kind of a walkway next to the river.
Sure.
They're going to be facing the place where they made the emergency landing.
How much I don't want to say trouble. How much difficulty or how much time did it take to reach out to the representative of the Belgian government that handles this sort of thing, submitting the paperwork, getting approved, and then finally getting the green light to go ahead and start down the roads that would produce costs, such as hiring an artist and start getting all the logistics side done?
Right. So what made it a little bit easier for us is that the major himself reached out to us to start this project. So I can imagine if it goes the other way, it's going to be a lot harder to arrange everything.
Are you associated with a group or a club that he became aware of? I mean, how did he find you to know you had this passion to spearhead this project?
Well, he attended the book presentation, and then he contacted Ivan van de Wiele, who is the representative of the Veterans Association in Wichelen. And then he reached out to me and Dirk because we made the book together. So now we're 3 people on some kind of work group, and each has his own specialty to organize everything.
We've discussed this on past episodes, Jeff, myself, and other people who've come on. Has it ever struck you as surprising the amount of things that you get involved with that are all interconnected because you started here? Like, oh, I have an interest in World War II. I'm going to do this research. That led to a book. And now all of a sudden here you are being part of a 4-man person group to help spearhead the creation of these landmarks. Mm-hmm. It always strikes me as amazing on how the decision to just get involved in this hobby leads us off down to these roads if we recognize opportunity and aren't afraid to act on them, but how it ends up putting us in situations we would never have thought we would find ourselves in otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. For me, this started in 2013, and I could never have imagined that this was gonna happen. But when I started this, for me, it was important to keep the story alive, and I think with this project, that's gonna happen, and so that's some kind of closing a circle for me.
Well, not to mention, sometimes when things like this happen, where a statue is revealed or a landmark or a monument, it oftentimes, through local news, website articles, YouTube videos, what have you, it oftentimes shines a spotlight on that particular topic that other people weren't familiar with. And then, kind of like your book and this military official who has connections in Belgium, someone sees it and they get interested in it, and they might have more backing, more support, and then that might lead into TV shows, what have you. So you never know, like you said, preserving a history, you never know what might come out of this further down the road once this particular statue's up and the story gets retold once again, and on a perhaps a larger scale.
Right. But I believe for me, the statue in Belgium is going to make people aware what happened in for the next couple of decades. We're going to have the memorial plaque in Germany, because I haven't told this yet, but when they made it back to England, they started flying new missions. And on February 3rd, 1945, they were killed in a mid-air collision with another B-17. So that's one of the things what I often wonder about, because I said they were lucky we had just been liberated when they made a crash landing here. But what if we hadn't been liberated? Maybe they would have survived the war in the prisoner of war camp. So that's something we're never gonna know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, because even though oftentimes prisoner of war camps are horrible conditions, like I just got done reading the book about Wake Island and the survivors who spent 3 years over in Chinese-based Japanese prison camps. And even though the Bataan Death March was horrible, and the hell ships, they called them, and then even the years they spent there, they're the ones who were lucky enough not to die in malnutrition. As you just said, they could have died on a battlefield somewhere. So it's just one of those situations, like, you never know. And it's sad to think, though, especially when it comes to the Air Corps, because we've all heard the stories of it. It's 25 missions, you get to go home. 27 missions, you get to go home. They keep raising it, raising it, raising it. It's crazy to think that we had almost more machines than we did humans, that, especially for the Army Air Corps, that these guys were getting shot down, rescued, brought back, and then going back to work like it's just another day at Monday. Okay, go back up, roll the dice again. And then, by the way, we just raised your mission count up. So that had to be so morally taxing on these guys to survive a down, a crash landing, or survive ejecting out, surviving your landing, capture, or evading capture, finally making it back, and then just getting up like it's another day. It had to be so hard to do day after day, year after year.
Yeah, it's we can't imagine what it's about and how it feels. But during my research, I learned a lot myself about these crews, because before I used to think, well, they had a pretty nice life, return to base every evening, have a good bed to sleep in contrast to the infantry troops. But if you read about the harsh conditions up in the air, the danger, they can't evade the fighters and stuff like that. It's, I think, not only physical but also mental. It's a very hard job to do.
Sadly, I wasn't into this hobby back then, and I didn't interview people, but I used to run an IT firm. And in the early, maybe 2006, 2007, I had a customer. I was working on his computer. Older gentleman. He's probably in his 70s, 80s then. He was annoyed that the lawn care guys weren't wearing ear protection. The leaf blower guy. He was just... And I couldn't understand why. And he finally said, you know what? He said, it's these young kids don't get it. He's like, I'm 85. I can't hear a thing. I went deaf because I flew planes during World War II, and they were essentially tin cans with no sound deadening, and he lost his hearings from the loud motors all the time. And so he would get annoyed that, in his mind, younger, 30-year-olds weren't wearing ear protection when running their leaf blower because they didn't think it would have an overall impact. Just like back then, they had more things to worry about than the sound of the motors. But once again, you're not aware of things until it affects you. So here's somebody who lost his hearing from being around loud equipment, and when he tries to explain that to other people, they're just like, "Whatever, old man." And we have such a problem, at least over here in the West, of not listening to our elders and appreciating their life experiences and trying to learn from them. I've often joked around that the biggest joke God played on man, regardless of how old or young you are, when someone older than you tells you not to do something because it's not going to turn out the way you planned, you just always assume they don't know what they're talking about because they're too old. Doesn't matter if you're 16 and they're 20, you're 25 and they're 30, you're 18 and they're 50. You just always assume the older people don't know what they're talking about, even though they have that life experience. And it doesn't matter how old you get, it always goes on. Even with our kids nowadays, don't do it. Okay. Learn for yourself.
Well, I have to admit, I was like that myself. But now, getting older, you realize, I guess it's been like that for ages.
Yeah, that's why I said it's the biggest practical joke, because we never learn. My 13-year-old's not going to learn. Your 20-year-old's not. No. And even we might start to learn when we get in our 50s. Like, yeah, maybe we need to start listening. But prior to that, no. It's just, it repeats itself all the time. So to get the plaque and that landmark done in Germany, how was that process?
It was a little bit harder because I had to reach out myself to the people in the town. Luckily, when I did the research for the book, I visited a town. It's called Lemke. And the major at the time, he was very helpful. So he brought me in contact with one of the eyewitnesses who saw the planes come down. He showed me in the cemetery where the crews were buried together in a mass grave. So it was, it helped me having a contact over there. So he brought me in touch with the right people, because at this time he isn't a major anymore. But I told him we have an idea to do something in Lemke as well for both of the crews. And because they were buried at the cemetery, I got in touch with, I think he's a pastor of the town, proposed him if he could do something. He had to do a meeting with all people from church council. But after going back and forth, we got the permission to hang up 2 small plaques, one in German and one in English, in honor of both crews who lost their lives there. So for me, it's important that we don't only remember them in Belgium, but also in Germany, all over. The 8th Air Force, they don't have many monuments like the infantry do, so I think they deserve some attention as well. And so that's what we are doing.
Do you find... See, here in the United States, the United States is so damn large, it takes days to drive across it. Whereas over in Europe, some of the countries are smaller, and you can go from country to country within a short travel time. And so you have the benefit of experiencing all these different cultures, all these different countries in a short period of time, whereas a lot of people in the United States never leave the continent. A lot of them don't even leave the state they live in. And so that really shrinks their worldview. Mm-hmm. I've been privileged enough and worked hard enough that I was born in Kentucky, grew up in Ohio, migrated to California in the early 2000s, and been down in Florida for 20 years. No, you don't have to be from here just to know that that's 4 different states, 4 different environments, 4 different cultures, because even in each state we have different cultures. And so you become more of a well-rounded person. And over in Europe, people tend to be more well-rounded because they can travel and experience these different cultures in a short amount of time. But I bring all that up to say this. When you travel around from country to country and areas, do you find when it comes to the subject of World War II, certain people are less likely to want to talk about it? Some people are more likely to want to talk about it, because obviously in Belgium, they were invaded. They were under control of foreign government, and then they were liberated. And so we know that in Belgium, obviously you guys want to celebrate the fact that you're liberated, but perhaps maybe a small town in Germany, maybe they would rather not bring some of these things up. Do you find it, is it kind of harder to approach people in different areas opposed to certain areas when it comes to the topic of World War II?
To be honest, it was a little bit harder to get the permission in Germany. We couldn't bring a large plaque, or we couldn't put any individual names from the crew members. So they did have some, how do I say it, restrictions, I suppose. So, but yeah, I'm glad we have the permission, because I don't think you can do this everywhere in Germany.
Yeah. Well, in just areas in general, because the audience may not take this into consideration. When creating a landmark, as the name implies, you need land. And most of these landmarks are on government property, or perhaps if it's a battlefield or a site of a down, it's someone's private property. And so you can't just go stick a monument there. You have to get permission of the person who owns that property. And if it's government, that's a lot of red tape. And even if it's a family, there may be a family members. This group wants to sell the land. This group, you never know what you're stepping into when you want to do something like put up a plaque or a statue. So there's always going to be something involved. And that's why I'm interested to hear of the steps in the process that was required of you. Now, I know that Belgium, their government was going to finance it, which is tremendous. The fact that this government's going to finance this project, whereas in Germany, they weren't, which is where your GoFundMe campaign came in place, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And you were able to achieve your goal?
Yeah, we got some donations from the relatives of the crew, and then half of the funds we needed was donated by the 398 Bomb Group Memorial Association.
That's fantastic.
So that's a big help. I think it probably helped that I was over there last year at the reunion, and I give a presentation about the crew, so they know what we're doing here.
I'm thrilled to hear that you achieved your goal, and as you said, more importantly, that you're bringing into existence technically three, if you're counting both plaques, three memorial objects to remind people, and not even to remind people, but let's be honest, to educate people on this particular accident and the Air Corps, because as you said earlier, with the exception of some of the newer, Masters of the Air and some of the other projects, even on a large scale, you go to any bookstore, any library, most of your books, regardless if you're looking into the Japanese military, German military, Italian, United States, whatever, most of your books are going to be about infantry and ground fighting. And there's fewer and fewer books about some of the other aspects of military life. For example, a few weeks back, we had on an author along with Dennis who have a tremendous affection for LSTs and the naval landing crafts and the PT boats. And we were talking about how, with the exception of maybe John F. Kennedy and PT-109 and some of the submarine stories we hear, you don't hear a lot about the LCI groups. You don't hear a lot about the the PT boat crews. And there's plenty of other aspects of the military on all sides during the war that people lent a very valuable contribution to their war effort that we never talk about.
For me, the book is also it's kind of bringing the crew back to life, because when I did the research, I contacted the relatives, and I discovered almost everyone had a small piece of information. Like they said, I have to call my niece, or I have to call my sister. And so by bringing the pieces together, they all realized, well, there's a story, because they only knew one part of the story mostly. But for me, that's one of the important things of this whole project. You bring the person back to life. So sometimes it's very sad to read all the personal letters. Like one of the crew members' dad, he wrote a letter. Well, son, I hope you're doing fine. You're almost coming home. But his son had just been killed in action the day before. So when you read things like that, it's emotional.
Dennis and I talked a few weeks back about because he's done research, and we had other authors on. When you're doing these research and you're lucky enough to have the grandmother or the aunt who got handed down the grandmother's collection of letters, paperwork, newspaper clippings, and how valuable it is to, as you just explained, read the words of these people. Could you imagine now, 80 years from now, let's say 10 years from now, there's another worldwide big conflict, and then 80 years from now, the survivors and the historians of the day, 80 years from now is wanting to do research. What do? Reach out to Yahoo, say, hey, can I have access to an email box server from 2024? That data's not there. It's going to be so hard to get firsthand accounts from people because they won't have handwritten letters. Oh, yeah, we got messengers sent to, my great-grandmother got a messenger in her Gmail, but it's been long deleted. So it's going to be so much. I mean, obviously there'll be more video footage of it. And
Right.
we see that over in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine and what's going on in Israel. There's a lot more video footage. But even in that video footage, very seldomly do you see the personal side. These guys aren't out in foxholes or flying in a plane in middle combat writing these letters. They're writing these letters during the reflection period when they're back off the line or back on the ground and they have time to reflect. A lot of that information is going to be gone in future history, I think, because of our form of communicating.
Yeah, it's especially for my kids, it's normal that you're on the other side of the world and I can see you, I can hear you, and vice versa. But back in the days, you're in a war zone, you write a letter, it takes a month, maybe even longer before you get a reply. So
even when I was in elementary school in the 80s, we had pen pal programs. We didn't have the internet. I mean, it wasn't even 39 short years ago. You'd go to school and in geography class, I got a pen pal in Germany, or I got a pen pal in London, and you would literally write letters just like our grandparents did or our parents did 10, 15, 20 years before. And so just in that amount of time from the mid-90s to now, it's just things have changed tremendously. The idea, when I was a kid, the idea that you and I would be communicating, this is George Jetson stuff. This was unheard of, and here we are doing it in real life.
right.
It's almost like a digital time travel almost.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what's going to be happening in 20 years from now. I always imagine myself like you have in Star Trek, the holodeck.
Yeah.
That would be nice to have something like that. And
I sadly think it'll be more like the Matrix or Wall-E, but we'll hope for the solo deck instead. That has a more positive outcome. We're not affixed to a machine. We're voluntarily going up there like on a cruise ship, which we kind of have with VR stuff. But so now that, what's the window? What's your all's deadline? When are you hoping to have these statues? Obviously, the plaques will be quicker to make and quicker to distribute than this whole process of the statue. Where are we at on the statue process?
so we're going to have the big ceremony the last weekend of August. There's a whole program for the festivities in Belgium. On Friday, we're going to watch on an open air screen the movie The Memphis Belle.
Nice.
Then on Saturday, we're going to have the families visiting the exposition we're holding about the 8th Air Force and Powell's crew in particular. But we're also going to have our other liberators, the Canadians, Belgium, Brigade Piron, the English. We're going to have 8th Air Force reenactors, which is going to be nice. I've provided them with all the mission information.
That's awesome.
So they're gonna hold a briefing like
Nice.
exactly how it was, and we're gonna have the family members sitting in front so they can follow everything that's going on. We're gonna have a flyover, then the revealing of the statue. Then on Sunday we're having a World War II vehicle ride, I would say, where we're gonna drive from the crash site to the castle in Wiese. We're gonna give the relatives a tour so they can see where their uncles stayed for a couple of days. one of the fundings, we had a brewery at the time, so the Canadians took him to the brewery for some tastings. Then on Monday, we're going to the American Cemetery near Liège in Belgium because the pilot and the navigator are still buried in Belgium.
And what date are you doing? What month is this?
This is so the last weekend of August, and then Monday, September 2nd.
Nice.
Yeah, so
we'll have to have you come back on after this is all done, and you can give us a rundown of how everything went. We'll have Jeff on, who's a big 8th Air Force.
Yeah, that would be nice. So that's going to be, I think, emotional when we visit the graves. Then we're going to Bastogne for half a day. And what's also important for me, when we go to Germany, we're going to make a stop in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Because I want to show the relatives why their uncles or great uncles, why they were fighting here.
Yeah.
So they can see the horror of the war and why it was needed, what was done by them.
Thank you for using that word, the horrors of the war. We have an issue here. Well, we did, not so much now, but about 10 years ago, we're having this issue here in the United States where people were wanting to remove statues of Civil War generals, early fathers of the country, based on what happened at that time. And I can understand that, but as a historian, I'm like, hey, the statue's there.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like what it represents, it doesn't have to be a celebratorial monument. It could be a reminder monument. So instead of removing it, maybe add a plaque saying this guy was an asshole for doing these things. If Germany wanted to do the same thing, tear down all these concentration camps that have been turned into reminders of horrible things and why we got to keep things under control and not allow this to happen again. If all those would have been removed, then we wouldn't have these reminders of how not to do things. And we were saying that here. It's like, well, if you tear down these statues, another 80 years from now, people aren't going to know that that history occurred and why it's important to know that history so that these things don't reoccur. And so I think it's important to remind people, just because something's a monument or a museum, it's not always in a celebratory fashion. It's oftentimes a educational and a reminder of how things shouldn't be and why we shouldn't allow this to happen again. And so for you to take the family members there as a reminder of, hey, this is why your family's fought, and this is, at the end of the day, the importance of this conflict, I think will impact their grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were lucky enough to be on that trip.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like you say, if you remove everything, and even these days we have people who don't believe in the Holocaust.
Yeah,
for
Holocaust
example.
deniers. Yep.
Yeah, so if you remove all of those things, the evidence is gone. So I think, like you say, it's important we keep these things and use them as a means to educate people.
Yeah, nothing's more of a reminder than a 12-foot tall, 15-foot wide mound of shoes. That'll quickly remind you of how real things were and the number of people that were involved.
Mm-hmm.
When you see those photos or those, to this day, they'll have the mound of shoes that were collected, or, the jewelry that was on display, or just anything that represents human life at a mass scale. They have those reminders. It's just mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's for example, in Bergen-Belsen, you have these mounds of dirt, and then there's a plaque that says 7,000 people are buried here, 11,000 people are buried here, and you can't imagine, but yeah, it's important people see it because it's even almost too crazy to believe it.
Well, on the behalf of myself, my show, my audience, we want to thank you and your team for your contribution of keeping history alive and bringing awareness to a story that most people probably don't know in those areas, and a reminder to those who knew the story, and to help bring public awareness through your books as well and your other projects. once this is all done, do you have anything else on the horizon, or are you just going to go about your daily life?
You know, in the town next to mine on the other side, we had a plane coming down, so who knows?
I'm sure being in that part of the world, there's probably plenty of locations that are still around and plenty of stories that have gone untold that you can probably be working on monuments for the rest of your days.
Yeah, it's important to try and get those last testimonies documented, because in a couple of years nobody's going to be around anymore, and yeah, so like everything, it's important to learn from the people who lived it.
Absolutely.
So, well, I want to thank you for having me on the show, and also for making it possible to remember Paul and his crew. So, and I'll make sure to give you an update after our big project is finished.
Please do. Where can people find you? Do you have any Instagram or Facebook pages or websites people can go to learn more about what you're doing, or your books or anything of that nature?
So if you want, you can add me on Facebook, and then when we have the statue, we're gonna have a QR code that people can scan with information. So maybe when that website is finished, I can provide you the link,
please.
and you can share it if possible.
And as always, if you guys head over to WTSPWWII.com, you can find the episode that this is attached to, and we'll have links, photos, and all of the pertinent information on this. Kristof, I'm going to try to say your last name. If I slaughter it, forgive me, but I want people to hear it.
Yeah.
Kristof-De-Geyter? Close enough? Maybe?
Yeah. Almost perfect. Thank you.
Almost perfect. That's what we strive for here on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. But thank you guys so much. And Kristof, thank you. And we're looking forward to having you back on the show. Who knows? Maybe if you need to get more word out before the big revealing, we can come on and have a reminder and then have you on a third time. But thank you so much. And thank you guys for hanging out. And we'll talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.